Hey everyone, this is Rachel at StudioUs with another at-home drawing lesson for you guys. We're continuing our May the 4th Star Wars series with a drawing of R2-D2. So go ahead and grab your supplies and we'll get started. You want to start with a blank piece of paper as well as a drawing pencil, a Sharpie marker, and a large pink eraser to clear off all your pencil lines at the end. So to start out, I'm going to visualize the horizontal center of my paper as well as the vertical center to kind of get everything aligned. And working down, I'm going to mark out the top of our first R2-D2 shape. Kind of visualizing where my center is, keeping track, working my way straight down to mark out the bottom. And then for the sides, I almost want to divide the paper in thirds. I should have one side there, one side coming out the other edge, and about the same space in the middle, maybe a little bit bigger. After that, I'm going to start on the sides since those go straight up and down. Dot my edges in. Get a little scoop along the bottom. Draw on the lines for the side, and then I will dot in the top part. I'm going to move that up just a little bit and get that arch at the top of R2-D2's body. Really take care with your first shape, it kind of sets everything else up. So going into the next shape, we're going to curve in a couple lines from the bottom, starting at those bottom corners and working in just a little bit, and then scooping around to kind of recreate that curved bottom line, just a little bit shorter. After that, in about the middle third of R2-D2's body, we're going to draw in the start of his arms. Marking out my top and bottom and how far out I want it to go. And you can see I'm measuring with my pencil to kind of make sure that these lengths are the same. So I'm making sure the width, how far out it goes from the body, is the same, and the length in terms of where it starts and where it ends also stays the same. Once I've got that marked out, I can draw in my lines. It's pretty much 3 straight lines and then curves where they would connect. Next, we're going to start working on the bottom parts of R2-D2's kind of arm appendages. And it's very similar to the process to get those little shoulder bits. I'm going to mark my top, bottom, and sides, and then get straight lines coming around to connect those. Making sure it's the same height, and compare distances, make sure everything's about the same, and mark it out. Notice that the sides for the bottom squares are about the same width out from the body as the shoulder bits. So we'll draw those in. And we want to get the lines connecting those two pieces as well. So they just go in a little bit from the sides there, right about where the curve stops and starts going into a straight line, and then another line a little bit in from that. We can get the curves on R2-D2's shoulders and set up the curved lines on the area that would kind of be his neck. So I'm going to mark out where they start and end, make sure they're the same height from either shoulder, and then it just curves up slightly. Add in our next set of lines. After that, we can set up the feet that R2-D2 has coming down off of those bottom squares that we drew in. So we've got two angled lines coming out in either direction, a flat line to connect them. We're going to do that on both feet, making sure they're about the same length. And then we get a line angling back up under his body to make that look three-dimensional. We've also got a small rectangle on each of those bottom, we'll call them hands, I guess. Hard to find body parts that describe R2. The little bottom curved squares that we drew in, we'll put a small rectangle on each of those. Alright, getting into some circles, we want to find the center point on R2-D2's body. I'm going to set up our first circle, so I'm marking out my bottom, top, and sides, and then drawing it in. Going straight up, we're going to put up the first circle on his head. It should be almost identically sized to the circle we had down at the bottom. And then imagining a straight line coming down right in the center of those little feet shapes we drew. We're going to set up two more circles, set up that forward foot for R2. Once we've got our circles in, we've got a couple little angled lines coming out of either the top or bottom, then extending down, flattening out to create that foot shape. We've also got a little bit of a detail here around that circle at the top of R2's head. And we're adding in a few lines on the feet just to add some detail. Lining up at the corners of that first flare, angle down to connect, and put the little details in the center on that front foot. Alright, we're starting to set up that front panel pattern on R2's body. So I want to make sure when I'm working on this part that I'm spacing everything out pretty evenly. These lines on the side are pretty narrow and I've got a lot of space between these first little panel bits and that circle in the center. So I want to make sure I'm leaving plenty of room to add in other pieces in our next steps. I notice the tops of those smaller rectangles at the bottom are just barely above our circle. And then the longer pieces extend all the way up, almost to R2's neck. So I'm going to set my first one up and draw both pieces in, then make sure the next one lines up and is the same size with those pieces. I want to keep them the same width as well, that way we're getting an even balance on either side of R2. So check my width and compare it. The way I do that, I just line up the tip of my pencil with one side of my shape and then use my thumb and my index finger to pinch where the other end of that shape is, and that gives me a measurement of the width of a shape just by using my pencil. And I can slide it over and compare it to where I want the shape to be and mark out my edges. So finish up that long curved rectangle on the other side. And we're off to a good start. So I'm going to mark out the tops and bottoms of some of these shapes so that I can space everything out evenly. I noticed that all that top row of shapes, the bottoms all line up evenly. And then working my way down, we've got a narrower rectangle in the middle, and then a little bit longer of a rectangle at the bottom. But those bottoms, or the rectangles on the sides and the rectangles in the center, all kind of create the same bottom line. So we don't want them extending down past the first set of bottom rectangles we drew too much. So once I've got my tops and bottoms marked out, I'm going to draw in my curved rectangles starting at the bottom. middle ones are almost ovals. They're so short, it's hard to get that curve, so the side's completely curved. You don't get a straight line along the side on those. And then for these upper rectangles, I'm going to mark out sort of where I want my top to be. And then I'm going to divide out my sides. And notice that that center curved rectangle is a little bit wider than the rest of them. So when I mark these out, I want to make sure that the ones on either side of that center one are about the same width as the lower rectangles below them, but that I'm leaving enough space in the center to get a little bit wider of a rectangle in there. So I've got our center pieces. I've left plenty of room for my wide rectangle in the middle. And I'm going to dot out my sides and draw that in, making sure to curve my edges. So straight lines on the top, bottom, and sides, and then curved corners instead of pointy corners. All right, getting a little bit more detail in there, we're going to get these lines on the bottom. And they pretty much just come straight down. We've got 3 long rounded lines breaking up that middle section on R2. All right, we're going to get 2 smaller rounded rectangles in that center rectangle panel that's a little larger. That's why we made it a little wider than the others. We've got a few details to fit inside. And marking out the rounded rectangles underneath that eye shape. So with these, we still want to mark out our top, bottom, and sides, and then draw them in with rounded corners. Notice that those 2 rectangles fit right underneath that eye shape we have. Then we've got 2 kind of curved sided rectangles. The top and bottom are flat, and then the sides curve out a little bit to make R2 look rounded. Adding some circle details into our bigger rounded rectangle, into the eye detail, setting up a little sensor for R2 as well. To finish out that sensor from the sides of the circle, we're going to create 2 lines kind of flaring out and then curving around, and then 1 more of those kind of curved rectangles that we did on the other side. Couple of line details on R2's shoulders. And that should about do it for our R2-D2 drawing. So we're going to grab our Sharpie, carefully go over all of our pencil lines, and then we'll get ready to color. Alright, with our Sharpie finished up, we'll grab our large pink eraser and clear off all the pencil lines underneath our Sharpie marker. And then we can start coloring. So I'm going to start with a seafoam green. You could also use a light blue or even a teal, whatever colors you have. I'm going to go around all of the edges of R2 and then fill in my background with that same color nice and even. Alright, we've got our background color all the way filled in. I'm going to go ahead and start with all of the blue spots on R2. So grabbing a blue marker, I'm going to look for all of those little blue details and color them in. R2-D2 is not very colorful. He's actually only got a little bit of blue, one dot of red, and then a little bit of gray here and there. So he's a pretty easy character to color in. Really be careful in all those little detail areas. Since there's not a lot of color, we want to be really careful with where we're putting it because the mistakes will show up even more, so really take your time. Alright, that looks like all the blues. Go ahead and take care of our red dot real quick. And next I'm going to take a light gray. In this case I'm using dolphin gray. And anywhere I see gray, whether it's light or dark, I'm going to color in those gray spots. So I'm getting all the little shadow details on his arms and feet, filling in all of the solid gray areas. Basically looking for any little gray spot. You want to look carefully because the light gray and the white look very similar. So I'm going to be careful not to color in any of the white areas, only where I see it going a little darker or where it's a really dark gray. So on the bottom of his body, it's very dark gray. I'm going to go ahead and color in that with the light gray first. We can always layer it up to make it darker. And on these rectangles, I notice that they're mostly light gray and they have a little white highlight up in the right-hand corner. So we're going to leave out those highlights, color in all of the light gray parts. If you've got a dark gray rectangle, we can color it all the way in right now, because the highlight is light gray and the rectangle is dark gray. We're going to set up all these grays early, let them dry a little bit, and then we'll go in and layer the darker color over it to create those darker gray shadows. So up on his head, I'm marking out that white highlight that we see on the top right side of his head, and then filling in the rest with my light gray. If you only have one gray, this works just fine. You'll just color it all in with the one gray color, and then wherever it's darker, we'll layer it up. I have a couple different grays, so the color I'm using right now is Dolphin Gray, and then when I go in with the darker grays, I'll use just a plain gray to fill that in. Got the last few shadows. All set. Next, we're going to grab a Sharpie marker. You can also use a black Crayola marker and color in any of the black spots. I think there's only 4, so this goes pretty quick. Getting those finishing touch shadows on there. I'm going to use an azure or dark blue, and wherever I see a little bit darker of a blue color on my blue areas, I'll put a thin line of dark blue to create that shadow. This is going to be the same technique we use for those grays as well. So just looking for anywhere it's a tiny bit darker. You gotta look really closely to spot those details. And finally, I'm going to take my gray marker and go over anywhere where it's darker. So we've got a little darker shadow on the feet, it's a little bit darker along the bottom, and those little joint dots on his foot, and some of the gray panels on his body. And once we've got all of our shadows added in, that about does it for our R2-D2 drawing. I hope you guys enjoyed this one and came out with an awesome looking R2-D2. We'll see you for the next video, and may the 4th be with you.